Rule breaker mailbag item number 9. This comes from Paul Peck, writing from Sela Energy Partners. I found this pretty compelling. Let's have a fun discussion here. He writes, David, please accept this in the spirit intended. I get it. The marijuana business seems to be a good bet right now. But the question I have for you is, are you really comfortable with pushing the pro-marijuana agenda when you're basically affecting young lives? There are many things to investing, and from a moral position, this should not be one of them that anyone with any moral compass should even consider, in my Paul Peck's opinion. He goes on, just as importantly, if I'm feeling this way, then there are thousands of others that you are alienating as well due to the fact that you are pushing the drug business, and to hell with what is right. Those are his words. That's why I will not join your, in quotes, club. He closes, over the last 4 years, I've traveled extensively to Denver, and the city that I once loved is now a place that I would now never consider moving to. The streets are littered with transients and young mounds of non-productive flesh that do nothing for our society but sit on the sidewalk and smoke pot. And you encourage that pestilence in our society. I just don't get it. I hope you find your compass. Paul Peck, Sela Energy Partners. Now, that said, David, I think he meant me, but since we're two Davids,
sure,
and you've done some work in this area too, I thought it'd be a fun conversation to have. So, David, what are some initial reactions that you have to that note?
Well, I think whenever we're talking about socially responsible investing or really figuring out our compass as investors, there is going to be that element of subjectivity. Some people will still stay away from alcohol, for instance. Does that mean you don't buy shares in Chipotle, which also sells alcohol in addition to burritos and tacos? You can really extrapolate this in a whole bunch of different ways. So I think we have to recognize that there won't be one hard and fast rule that everyone agrees on when we're talking about social responsibility.
And that's such an important point. I just want to echo that, David, by saying we believe that responsibly investing and investing foolishly means that your money is following your beliefs. So I would be the first to say that for Mr. Peck or his ilk, that it makes no sense to invest in that area of the world. And I personally have not invested in any marijuana companies. I have no problem per se with the legalization of marijuana. I think I've generally been pro that for years and years. It all goes back. I remember reading Stephen Jay Gould, the Harvard scientist, once wrote an article. It was either for the Atlantic or Harper's, and he wrote, it was called The War on, in parentheses, Some Drugs. And he was pointing out that there's really not that much difference between what marijuana and alcohol does to our bodies. If you were to look at what they do to our societies, alcohol does far more damage globally than marijuana. It's not even close. And I remember reading that as a young man thinking, that he makes a really good point there. It is kind of arbitrary how we've decided this one is legal and that one's not. There's some social and historical background to this. But in the end, I totally agree, David, that foolishly investing, you should put your money where your money is.
Absolutely. And when it comes to cannabis, I think you do have to recognize that even pre-legalization, it's not as if there wasn't cannabis in the streets or in society. I grew up in Northern California, kind of the weed capital of California and the country pre-legalization. And it's not as if young people weren't getting their hands on marijuana. Just because the drinking limit is 21 doesn't mean you're not having 19-year-olds getting their hands on alcohol. It's some of these things you just can't necessarily limit. So in general, I personally would prefer a non-criminalized substance. So like I would prefer cannabis be legalized and in the open rather than having really a police state around cannabis. Now, of course, there will be some give and take with that. And I think as a society, we're still adjusting to what does legalized cannabis look like. And Colorado, California, some of these relatively earlier states to legalize the substance, they're kind of the testing ground for what is the right mix of policy and practice.
And to that end, David, I wanted to mention, I was just reading this, I think it was in The Economist recently, with the recreational use of cannabis now legal in 10 states and the District of Columbia, and medical marijuana legal in 23 states, marijuana is on its way to becoming an $80 billion industry in the United States by the year 2030. That's according to estimates by Cowen, Inc., the research firm. So there's no question in my mind. I think this is around for the rest of our lives. I think society is shifting here. Some people aren't going to like it, certainly. But if you're just looking at the reality of it, where it's already legal, and you know this far better than I do, David Kretzmann, some of the numbers, but that's a pretty astonishing thing to think about, an $80 billion industry 10 years from now.
Yeah, and there is a lot of nuance within the industry. You have the recreational side, kind of the classic, eating an edible or smoking a joint, where you're really doing it for leisure or for fun. But you also have the medical side, which to me, that gets me most excited. I don't personally use cannabis products, but
I never have myself. I don't have any interest, but I do like alcohol.
Okay, well, there you go, which is a drug.
It sure is.
But the medical implications, last summer you had the FDA unanimously approve Epidiolex, which was the first cannabis-based drug that treats a rare form of childhood epilepsy. Again, we're still in the very early stages of researching the plant, the substance, its potential uses. But I think there's far more upside for us as a society from legalizing it, from researching the plant, better understanding it, similar to what we know the dangers of alcohol. Mm-hmm. People still, make their own decision when it comes to alcohol, that they're taking responsibility in most cases for it. I think cannabis should be similar, but by all means, if you're not comfortable with cannabis or believe in the business, stay away as an investor.
I agree. And to close, that's why I appreciate being able to share that as our final mailbag item and to have you in with your perspective, David. And I absolutely appreciate Mr. Peck taking the time to write us. It does take two to make a market. We all have different views about what's going to work, what's not, what should be allowed to work, what shouldn't be allowed to work. And that's part of working together. I think what's great about the United States of America is more than any country in the world, even though people talk about how divided we are, I think we're actually far more united by the idea that we should talk things out and try different things. Some states it's legal, some states it's not. There are lots of different approaches, but to bring it forward to a final point, foolish investing is about making sure you put your money where your money is. Some of us think alcohol is great. Some of us think alcohol is horrible. Statistics show us all kinds of different things. Here's a funny stat. Denver, which Mr. Peck mentions at the end of the note, I was just reading the U.S. News & World Report came out with the top-ranked U.S. cities, and what was number 2 on the list just a week ago, days after I read this email? Denver. So it seems like they're doing things pretty well, but sounds like this is a gentleman who probably knows the city better than I do. He sees certain things. Sometimes we see what we're looking to see ahead of time, but so for most of us, I think we do well uniting a combination of our own horse sense, our own instincts of what we want the world to look like, and invest that way toward a better future, but also use data and objective understanding that goes outside of our own opinion in order to try to reach our best ideas about not only how to invest, but how to run this country.